What's up, guys? BJ here. Welcome to the Meta Snapshot for weeks 3 and 4 of the Heirs of the Omen expansion set. We are literally a couple of days away from the first ever balance patch. Just did a quick video on that if you want to go and check that out on the channel. But yeah, I would expect we might see a few new changes next week. But for now, let's dive into what the meta looks like. As usual, we're going to cover our 4 tiers and we're going to talk about some really high quality example deck lists that have had proven success as well. So with that said, if you like the sound of that, give this a thumbs up and let's dive on into this week's Meta Snapshot. Okay, so first of all, we have got our tier 4 decks. Now, this, as I've said previously, it doesn't mean that tier 4 decks can't get wins from even the top tier decks. They can, they absolutely can. But they tend to be seen as a little bit memey. You will see them on ladder because they're kind of fun to play, but they're not going to give you a consistent win rate, right? So they're fun to play, they can pick up wins, but not consistent. And I think the new fluctuation mechanic for Runecraft is a great example of that. Maybe in the future this will be a pretty powerful deck, but right now it's not that powerful. I think it's missing a few cards, but it is definitely a fun new way to play Rune. We've got Miracle Jerry, Artifact and Puppet have both fallen down into tier 4. And Rose Queen, I did put up to tier 3 last week, but I think actually it's still in the meme category. I thought it might have got a bit more consistent. It has had a few nice additions to it, but I still don't think it's quite on the same tier as the other tier 3 decks. I've also thinned the tier list a little bit this week. There were quite a lot of things that were getting a bit duplicated and they get a bit broad and they weren't all seen on ladder. So let me know what you think to that. I have tried to thin out to the main decks that you are likely to see. So let's take a look at examples of these tier 4 decks. Okay, so the Fluctuation Rune, as I said, this is a fun new mechanic, the Institute of Truth being an amulet that can essentially change or alter all of the costs of your cards in hand, and those then give you benefits like, you know, the Illusionary Conjuration. You can suddenly becomes a hard removal if the cost is changed and things like that. So yeah, it's a fun idea. I'm really looking forward to seeing this sort of archetype develop in hopefully the next expansion. But right now I think it's probably missing a few cards to be you know, consistently powerful. Next up, we got Miracle Jerry. This is all about basically trying to end the game by going turbo draw through the deck. It's quite a lot of fun, to be honest. Probably going to get even better when Liu Fang gets the buff. So this is a deck I definitely want to come back to and try. But basically what you're trying to do is play Jerry and the ruler of Cocytus in the same turn. You basically then just end the game instantly, right? So yeah, it's very, very fast. It's one of the best kind of miracle OTK approaches to the game right now. And at the same time, it's still a little bit memey. So yeah, it's a fun tier 4 deck if you want to try that one out. Artifact Portal just has gone all the way down from tier 1 in set 1. I don't really expect this to change much, to be honest, after the balance patch. It definitely needs a little bit of help. It can pick up wins against some of the top decks, but overall, I think the heal that's been added to the game has really, really hurt the power level of this. And cards like Ralmir starting to age a little bit now. I don't know whether it's really worth the 8 cost, to be honest. And yeah, so it's slipped all the way down to tier 4. It's not played much these days, and if it is, it's in the lower tiers. Puppet is still pretty good, and this is definitely one of the decks that we're going to see change in next week's Meta Snapshot, because this is where most of the buffs have come. And so I'm really excited to jump back into Puppet next week once the balance patch lands, and we can kind of start to see how it looks. But this is the kind of pretty standard for now deck, but I do expect some of these cards are going to change. So look out for this one next week for sure. Next up, we've got the Storm Haven. Again, another deck that can be really, really powerful on the turns that it goes off, and if the right things combo and you draw the right cards in the right order, it can be fantastic. But, you know, the other half of the game, you're going to draw the cards in the wrong order, and it's going to lead to inconsistency. So, yeah, I could still feel like this archetype needs a little bit of something. I'm not quite sure what, to be honest. But overall, it's still definitely its own archetype, and it's fun to play. It's just not quite consistent enough. And then the Rose Queen combo, as I said, it's benefited from some of the new cards, like the Eradicating Arrow, for example, and the Hamlet definitely helped this card, this deck. It really is sitting between the kind of tier 4 and tier 3 kind of level for me. I think it's probably better than the other tier 4s that we've just shown, but yeah, it's either bottom of tier 3 or top of tier 4. So speaking of tier 3, let's move on up. We can see in this week I have got Wardhaven at the bottom. We've got Exudia Control, which is actually struggling quite a bit on ladder, even though it did have some pretty impressive performances, not least obviously taking down the SVO2. We've got the Egg Portal. Again, just don't think this deck, even though it's a fun new archetype, I don't think it's really powerful enough to warrant a tier 2 slot anymore. Aggro Abyss has fallen off because the other Abyss decks are better, and obviously the heal that's been added to the game makes it harder to aggro your opponent down. And then you've got Disdain Ramp and Storm Jerry. Now Storm Jerry, if I'm honest, this is the deck that got me to Grandmaster. I think this is again the top of tier 3, could easily make an argument for bottom of tier 2, but I do think that the increase in things like Abyss and the amount of heal and kind of ward units and things do make it a bit harder. So I don't know, it's really sort of on the edge. It's like a 2.5 deck almost. So let's take a look at some examples. This is your Wardhaven, classic stuff. There are a few options now, I think, with Wardhaven. There are cards that you can slot in and out, but I do think that it's just not quite as good as the 2 other Haven decks that I've got for you that are higher than this. One of those is a new entrant into the tier list, so stay tuned for that. Now, the Exudia Control, I haven't changed from Barrick's list. It won the SVO qualifier, so as far as I'm concerned, it's the most credible version yet when we're talking about tier lists. But you know, I do hear from Barrick that it is struggling a little bit on ladder, and yeah, I don't think it's quite consistent enough to be a higher tier ladder deck. Now, the Egg Portal is obviously a new archetype that was added. People have started running things like the Dogged one in there, try and give it a little bit more reach. I just feel like it's got great ideas, but it just struggles sometimes to close the game out, especially again with some of the heal. And then even when you think about things like Crest Haven and Rune, right, they can just basically do their thing that kind of wins the game a little bit quicker than the Egg Portal reaches its win con. Aggro Abyss is pretty, you know, it's pretty standard, really, pretty unchanged. Just a great quick game if you want just quick games on ladder. Especially if you're like new to the game and you're climbing from lower ranks, this is a great deck to climb with. But at the higher ranks, when people understand the matchups, it is going to struggle a bit more with all the heal. The one advantage this does have as a ladder deck is that people won't expect it to be Aggro Abyss right now. They'll be expecting mode, they'll be expecting mid-range. They won't necessarily be expecting aggro, and that could cheese you some wins as well. Next, we got the Disdain Dragon. It's not an archetype I've played too much of personally this season, obviously bringing in the new Disdain rules with things like Uzurfit and Supplicant and the Ferocious Flame. But it's, you know, it's pretty decent. It's a little bit more consistent because the curve kind of works. If you don't hit the Dragon Sign ramp or the Lu Feng, you've still got a decent-ish curve. So it's not bad. I think Ocean Rider's really added a lot to Dragon, but I don't think I'd give this any higher than tier 3 now that the dust is starting to settle. And as I said, last but not least, the Storm Jerry deck that got me to Grandmaster and also hit rank 1 at one point in this season. I do think that this deck is really good, and personally I think it's the best Dragon deck, and it can get a lot of wins. It's also got the Jerry card in there that actually just really helps with the curve. You don't often go into the Jerry alt win con, but you can do that where, for example, you don't have enough storm damage to end the game, or you know your opponent's got like a lot of heal as well. So I think it's a really good deck. I think if you're a Dragon player, I'd probably recommend playing this. But I don't know if it's quite in tier 2 at the minute. I think it's kind of, I tried to be a bit ruthless this week as I thinned out the amount of decks on the tier list. And so this is right at the top of tier 3, but I wouldn't kind of fight it too hard if someone said it was bottom of tier 2. So, speaking of tier 2, we have got a few interesting ones in here. So, mid-range sword is starting to make a bit of a comeback. It's actually very good against its sword counterpart, which is the loot sword. And yeah, it's always been a good deck. It was tier 1 last season, and it hasn't fallen off that badly. So that's still up there, propping up probably the bottom of tier 2. And then we've got the Hybrid Haven build, which is a new deck build, a new archetype. I'm going to talk to you about one of the top streamers, Toby, reached rank 1 in the hybrid class rankings with the deck I'm about to show you. We've also got Tempo Fairy, which obviously has seen a big improvement this season with the introduction of Jerry, and it's probably the deck that's benefited the most from Jerry being introduced to the game, because it always had one of the best tempo players turn by turn in the game, but it just fell off a little bit and lost value towards the end. Now it can pivot into Jerry. It really is a pretty cool deck, but you know, there's a bit of skill in it and knowing kind of when to pivot, but overall it's putting up decent results. Combo Roach is in an interesting spot because I still think it's a tier 1 tournament list, but if you can play it well, it's still the hardest game in the deck to play. If you play it right though, the power ceiling is so high that you could still make an argument it's tier 1. However, I do think that with the introduction of the extra Haven decks and the even some of the other tier 1 options, it can struggle, but it's got a good matchup into Spell Boost Rune, which is its main sell point, and why it's also such a good prey deck in tournaments. But on ladder, you're not always going to get that match, so it's a little bit less consistent, but still very powerful if you know what you're doing. Next up, we've got Mid-Range Abyss. We've got a new version of Mid-Range Abyss that has come on this week, and it's doing very well on ladder. It's a different way to play compared to, say, mode. It's a bit quicker. It has slightly better matchups into some of the tier 1s. So yeah, it's pretty interesting, and let's take a look at the deck list. So this is the mid-sword list that I've got for you. There's quite a few different variants that you can run, but obviously the main thing here is you've still got things like the Luminous Mage, you've got the Gildarias in there, even things like the Coachwoman in the early game to stick, and it has still added the Congregant of Usurpation, even though it's not a loot deck, because that card's just a really good card on 4. And you've got the Grimnirs in there as well to benefit Gildaria, giving you the extra super evos. You get that kind of 2 damage AoE more times in this deck than you would in a non-sword deck. The Hybrid Haven. So this is a deck that Toby reached rank 1 with, and it's really, really interesting because it really is hybridizing. It's got the crest outfit in there, but it's also got a ward shell in there. Because you're playing Wilbur anyway for the crest, you're kind of making use of Aether, but you're not making use of Aether to pull like tons of wards. Although you have got the Grimnir and you have got the Supplicant, so that's 2 wards that can be pulled. But and you've got the Knight of the Holy Order, so that's 3 wards that you can pull. You can also pull Gilnalise as well, which is kind of interesting because it gives you emergency access to heal, which is really quite cool. And then, interestingly, with the triple gene, you've got even things like the avian statues in there giving you, like, alternative win cons, right? I also love that it plays 2 Dark Havens in here as well, because, for example, you could play something like Aether, it would pull out a Gilnalise, and then you could Super Evo the Gilnalise, and then use a point from Dark Haven, and you make this, like, bigger heal. So there's some kind of interesting combos that you can do. And of course, you've got Jerry in there to pivot as well into, so maybe you put like a few crests on and then you pivot into Jerry, and you've got the Jerry wing con as well. So it's kind of got like a little bit of a Storm wing con. It's got a little bit of the kind of Aether sort of ward wing con. It's got the crest wing con. It really is a hybrid of all the best bits from Haven plus the Jerry thing as well. So you've kind of got to know, I think, the different game plans and be able to pivot well. Obviously, Toby's done really well. Congratulations to him for getting to the top of the Haven class rankings. That's a fantastic achievement. And cool to see a new archetype being pulled off at that high level. All right, next up we got Tempo Fairy. So this is the deck we talked about earlier. We first saw this in the Pro League. And the cool thing is you just have amazing tempo right from the start, right the way through to kind of like free Bales and Odins, giving you reach and obviously all your fairies after an area can hit face. And then, of course, mini roach combos to finish. If you run out of steam, you've got Jerry that can basically allow you to pivot into that alternative win con and give you back the cards in hand that you would otherwise run out of steam and lose playing this deck. Okay, Combo Roach, as I say, has slipped a little bit, but this is Rika's version. Still one of the best Forest Combo Roach players, I think, in the game. If you want to watch some of his gameplay, you can watch on the Rage channel, watch the Pro League games there. But this is a really nice build. Some people don't run the Olivia. They just basically don't have anything expensive whatsoever. But I think this version is pretty powerful. And yeah, if you know what you're doing, this deck can just, as I say, beat down your opponent by turn 9, even from full 20 health. So it's pretty awesome. Now then, Mid-Range Abyss is a deck that has been around, but it's been refined, and this has really shot up in the last week. Seen a lot more play of this on ladder and a lot of really good results being posted, a lot of win streaks, a few tweaks here and there. But I like the consistency of your curve from turn 2, whether you get the Mummy or the Mino is pretty good to just drop onto, because then if it dies, you then get the Skeleton, which you can play for 0 cost. And of course, Ghastly Soiree is really cool. I did just make a very recent deck guide with this deck. We'll go into this in a lot more detail, so go and check that out if you want to know more about this. But there's just some really solid plays all the way, you know, like things like the Congregant in mid-game, the Undead Soldier's really sticky, Supplicant's a great addition, allowing you to trade really well. And then rather than trying to get, you know, the Sanacha and the mode, all the mode stuff off and going late, you've got things like Odin to just kind of beat down with Rule Knight, beat down Cerberus, beat down, and basically try and close the game out before you get to any of that nonsense. So when it comes to the top tier, I've done something that I've not really done yet on my tier list, but I felt like I really had to. I think very hard before doing this. And that is, I have got Loot Sword and Mode Abyss in what I'm calling tier 1.5, because I do think that those two decks are a slight kind of level above the tier 2 decks, but I don't think they're quite on the Spell Boost Crest Haven level. And I thought really hard about splitting it this way, but I kind of thought this was the best way to articulate it. So I do think that Loot Sword is very powerful. It has some of the best aggressive play and amazing beatdown tools in the game right now. And Mode Abyss has just kind of like really earned its slot. It started off much lower, but it's just proven itself in tournament after tournament. We've seen Mode Abyss taking away the win, right? And I think it's a deck that, I think it's the Abyss deck that the good players who know what they're doing with it do tend to get more power out of it. And I think they've shown that it actually, in terms of a tier list, is really right up there, high power ceiling. Can be a little bit inconsistent, maybe slightly less consistent than the Spell Boost Crest Haven. But my gosh, the power level's amazing. Some of the new cards are really fantastic. And then in tier 1, surprise, it's still Spell Boost and Crest Haven. I think Crest Haven has really established itself as a super powerful, super obnoxious deck. And yeah, it deserves to be right up there, shoulder to shoulder with Spell Boost. So let's take a look at the example deck list. Here's the Loot Sword. Some people run the tablet, some people don't. But I do think that outside of that, this is pretty potent. This version, with having the tablet, makes sense to run 1 copy of Centaur, 1 copy of Ravening, because it means that, you know, if you thin everything down to 1 copy, you're going to find things that give you reach between the Odin, the Ravening, and the Centaur. Whereas if you had 2 Ravening Centicles, for example, and not Centurion, then you'd kind of lose one of those. So it does kind of make sense. If you want like slightly less aggro, you could drop the Centurion altogether, especially if you were dropping the tablet, and then fill out your mid curve a little bit more. But overall, I think this is this is a really good version. We saw it get to the final of the SVO2 as well. And yeah, Loot Sword, tons and tons of beatdown, really powerful. With Sincero, you've got the Zirconia in the early game, and the Sincero going off into Odin, into one of your finishers. Maybe you've managed to stealth up a Valse, for example. And of course, Octrice as well, giving you the crest, where she can give you an extra 4 damage to face on an empty board. This is the Mode Abyss deck. If you've been living under a rock, you might not have seen this, but this has pretty much become the kind of standard ladder Mode Abyss deck. That really cool combo of using the Reaper Deathlash on Leers, and then using things like Chaos Cyclones to bring the Leers back, giving you both a ward and card draw to keep cycling through your deck. I think that's one of the cool things about this version, is that Abyss has sometimes been criticized for being a little bit inconsistent, but this version really does have the draw. And of course, using things like the Screaming as well, Screaming and Loathing, just allowing you to thin your deck out and draw early is just fantastic. Single copy of Medusa in there as well to deal with those really pesky Norman boards, right? Medusa just has no problem cleaning those up as well. So yeah, I think this is a really, really powerful deck. It's a little bit slower than the mid-range version, and sometimes can kind of like lose before you get the juicy Shamnatcha stuff off. Or one of my teammates had something like 18 faith and still hadn't found a Shamnatcha. You can have those games as well. But overall, I think this deck is really cool, and to be honest, one of the probably one of the highlights of set 3, this deck coming about. So into Tier 1 Cresthaven, here we go. This is the Cresthaven deck that I think is, yeah, it's right up there. There's a couple of cards that have been tweaked, but I'm going to be taking this to the SVO qualifier 4 this weekend, so we'll see how I get on. But the deck just feels absolutely phenomenal. Maddening Benson, just, you know, if you get that off, you often just win games. A lot of decks trying to beat you down, trying to rush you down. So if you can get the Maddening off, tends to be all over. And then Spell Boost Rune. The biggest thing to say on this is that people seem to have dropped a lot of the AoE. I'm not sure that's right, to be honest. I think it's already starting to come back a little bit, whether it's the Flames or whether it's a copy of William in there or something. But obviously, this is just all about taste and trying to adapt to the current meta. So, you know, you've got to decide what you think you're going to be facing and just tailor a few cards. But like 90% of this deck is established at this point. I won't go on and on and on about all of the amazing turn 10 combos you can do once that Dimension Climb costs 0, because you've probably heard it all a million times. But this is 100% a Tier 1 deck still. And to be honest, it is a miracle that this thing survived the balance patch. If anything was going to get nerfed, I really thought it might be this deck, but it hasn't. So we're going to have to see like what this next month's like. Obviously, the data that Cygames get, they must be confident that it's not too dominant. And personally, I actually think that the meta, in terms of balance, is not too bad. Like, I've played a lot of CCGs, and trust me, I've seen way more obnoxious one-sided metas than what we are currently in. You don't get the level of variety. You might see 3 decks being played at best. And we're not in that stage with Shadowverse. There are many, many decks. Many we've covered in this tier list. So there's many decks that are still playable and can do well. So it's not an obnoxious meta, but I do understand that people are getting a little bit tired of playing against this, and particularly in tournaments, this thing is just really kind of dominating what we see. So as I say, we are about to see quite a few changes coming, and we are hopefully going to see some more competitive Dragon and particularly Puppets in the Portalcraft as well. So we'll see how that shakes out this week, and I'll be back next week with a Meta Snapshot to comment on that. But overall, guys, this is the full tier list for this week, weeks 3 and 4, the 27th of September 2025. So yeah, hit that thumbs up. Let me know in the comments anything that you would disagree with, or maybe change or have a different way around. Always good to get more feedback from the community, so appreciate all the support. And yeah, take care of yourself, guys. I'll see you in the next one. Ciao for now.